All right, the next thing I want to take a look at is the box model. So here I have a page created, and I just have a header, a section, and each of these sections has a header, and they've got a few paragraphs in them. I've already got them mostly set up. On this paragraph, I have a class margin-50, and I say that this paragraph has a margin of 50 pixels. We can see here it looks just like all of the others. That's because we haven't put in the styling for that yet. And I've done the same thing down here with the padding. So now I want to go into the styles.css and set the styles for those. First, I'm going to go ahead and put a border on all of my paragraphs, because that'll make this a little bit easier to see. Border 1 px solid black. So now when I save this and we refresh the page, we can see these all have this default styling, the margin, padding, and so on. So now I want to select those elements that I gave this class of margin 50 and padding 50. So dot margin dash 50, and I'm going to give this a margin of 50 pixels all around, and I'm going to do the same for the padding dash 50 class, so that we can see what these are doing, because they are going to act differently because of what your margin and your padding are. So here I'm going to save this, refresh my page, and now we can see this difference here, where inside here you have your element, and then the next thing is your border, or inside of the border you have your padding, then your border, and outside of that you have your margins. So we can see here the outside of this, it has the same amount of space between all of these down here in the padding section, where up here in the margin section, these first two have this space in between the elements, but this next one, because I set it to 50 pixels, we have 50 pixels of space between the top of this element and the bottom of this element. And we also have 50 pixels of space between the bottom of this paragraph and this heading down here. Now the padding, like I said, it goes inside of the border, so we can see instead of being like these and it almost touching the top where the border is and the bottom and this left side, we have a lot of space here. We have 50 pixels above the text, to the left of the text, and below the text. Now if you want to see a better or another example of that, if you right click on one of your elements on the page somewhere, you can click inspect, and then that is going to pull up these dev tools somewhere. So now I can see that inside of here I have a visual of the box model for my element. So let me move this over. And now I can see when I hover over this, I can see where the margin is. I can see where the border is. Remember, I gave it a 1 pixel border. That's what that is. And then 50 pixels of padding inside. And it's highlighting that on the page as I go to give me a better idea of where exactly those elements are. And we'll look at using these dev tools a little bit more later on. There's some pretty cool stuff that you can do with it. So we will definitely get into that. But being able to see this and visualize it can be helpful when you're trying to get an understanding of that box model. And even if I didn't have anything set for these, let me right click and inspect that one. I can see what those default margins and padding are. For that one, it doesn't have any padding. It has this border that I gave it and the 16 pixel margin on the paragraph tag. Now, going back in here, the way we set this all in one place. You can set these individually for the top, bottom, left, and right, like this. So margin top, margin bottom. We'll say that's 15 pixels. And we'll take this down to 25. Actually, I'll make this 30. And you can do the same with your paddings. So padding left. Maybe I don't want it to be that far in. Maybe I want to go with 15 pixels from the left. And padding top, I'm going to go with 25 pixels. Padding bottom, I'm going to go with 10 pixels. And then we can save this. And now the text in these is incorrect, obviously, because we just changed what those are. But when we refresh this, we can see the margins are different. This padding is different on each side. There are a few ways that we can set those, setting them individually like this, or we can just use margin and just use padding like we had before, but we can set all of those in one rule. So here in the margin, if I wanted to set all four sides to different values, then that's going to start with the top. So we'll say a top of 10 pixels. A paragraph has more than that to begin with, so we'll go 20 pixels. And then just space. Then the right hand side, I'm going to give it a 50 pixels on the right hand side. Then the bottom, I'm going to tell it I want to go 250 pixels just to have a huge number there to be able to see that. And then the left side, I want it to only come in maybe 17 pixels, not very much. And we can do the same thing with our padding. I'm going to go ahead and just use these same numbers, copy that and paste it in here. And now when I save my page or save my code, when I refresh this, we can see it's about 17 pixels from the left here, just a little bit in. And the top is 20 instead of 16. You can't see that real well because it's not a huge number. The right is 50 pixels in, and then below this we have that extreme 250 pixels that we added. So when you're setting them this way, whether it's the padding or the margin, just remember it's top, right, bottom, left. So you're starting at the top and you're just working clockwise around that box. Now coming down here looking at the padding, we can see we have a similar thing going on. We have 20 pixels at the top, 50 pixels to the right, maybe more because this didn't take up the entire box. So I'm actually going to come over here and copy this and paste it a couple of times to make sure that it is taking up the entire width of the box so we can see what's going on. Now when I refresh this, we can see there's that, again, the 20 pixels at the top, 50 pixels to the right, 250 pixels on the bottom. That's why there's all this extra space here before you hit the border again. And 17 pixels on the left. And there are a handful of ways that you can do that. Check out W3 Schools, see some of the things they say. There are some tricks to centering some elements. So this element, if I just wanted to set the top and bottom as one value and then the left and right as another value, I can set that by just using two values. So 50 pixels and then 25 pixels. That will be a 50 pixel top and bottom and then a 25 pixel left and right. So now if I save this, I can see it did that. That's another way that you can set that. Another trick that you can use to center some content, depending on what you need to do, you can center an element. You can set the top and bottom margins to whatever. I'm just going to use 0 pixels. And if you're using 0, you don't have to follow it with the PX, but it's good practice to go ahead and do that just to remember. And then I'm going to use the auto keyword here. And what that's going to do, it's going to set the top and bottom to 0 pixels for the margin. And then it's going to automatically decide what it wants for the left and right. Now, since this is a paragraph, it's an element that takes up the entire width of the page. We would need to change that width, so I'm going to go ahead and do that up here. I'm going to tell it I only want it to be 50% of width, 50%. I only want it to take up 50% of the browser width, or my window. So now when I refresh this, all of these paragraphs are only half the width of my window, and this one that I gave that margin to is centered inside of there. There are other ways that we can center the text or center some things. Sometimes we have to center the element. We can use text align. It all comes down to what your need is.